ever did in a negotiation. It is so good.
What the Obama administration and our European allies did with the Iranians is a template for what not to do.
Do you think that's a Christian approach? I'm still not hearing you argue that it's a Christian policy, sir.
Jim Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, you saw Dennis Rodman as relevant.
I do.
President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong Un in a meeting to remake history, to shine in the sun. One moment, one choice. What if? The future remains to be written.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable. As always, lot we are going to get to today. I'll just start off with this. I don't know if you remember this, but Barack Obama supported the bid of Chicago to get the 2016 Olympics. Failed. He wrote a letter to Sepp Blatter, the president of the International Soccer Association, to host either the 2018 or 22 World Cup. Shutout. Barack Obama 0 for 3 on the international stage. Donald Trump got the World Cup for America and Canada in 2026. All right, let's turn our attention to the scriptures as we begin the program today. We are in John 18. Schedule is at pray.afa.net, where you can find a scripture passage for every day and a prayer that actually incorporates the words of that passage of scripture. And we're going to do that here in just a minute. We're going to incorporate the words and themes of John 18 into our prayer for each other today. But this is a chapter that takes place in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where Jesus was arrested and so forth. And we're told in here that this is a place that he frequently went with his disciples. So if they needed a break, or if he wanted to have an opportunity to have a quiet, uninterrupted Bible study with them, or a time of prayer with them, this is where they would go, the Garden of Gethsemane. I've been there, and I imagine it's pretty much today, much like it was in the days of Christ, a very quiet place, surrounded, obviously now, by a lot of buildings and so forth. But that's why Judas knew where to find Jesus when he took the officers to arrest him, knew right where to find him. So Judas went out and he procured a band of soldiers and some other officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. Now, one point I want to make here, this is kind of an incidental point, but it's very important. You know, people say that Jesus was not involved in politics. Well, he was. Every single day of his public life, he was involved in politics. Who were his enemies? The scribes and the Pharisees. What did they have the capacity and the authority to do? To send soldiers and officers to arrest Jesus. They were politicians who had authority to send people out to arrest people, to take them into custody, to put them on trial, as we see later in this section. So don't believe it when people tell you that Jesus wasn't involved in politics. He did battle with politicians every single day of his ministry. Every time he was taking on the scribes and the Pharisees, he was taking on politicians because they were the ones that had the authority to write laws for the people, to arrest people, to jail them, and to put them on trial. So don't buy that lie that he was not involved in politics. Now, when they came up to Jesus, you remember this, Jesus said to them, he went forward to meet them. In other words, he didn't retreat, he didn't hide, he didn't find an olive tree to get behind. He approached them as they came into the garden and said, "Whom do you seek? Who are you looking for?" And they answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus said, "I am he." Now, literally, what he said is, "I am." Your translations will say, "I am he," but the he has been added. Literally what he said, "I am," adopting for himself, taking to himself, taking upon himself the very name of the true and living God Yahweh, because that's what Yahweh means in Hebrew. I am who I am. I will be who I will be. That's the name Yahweh. That's what it means in Hebrew. And 3 times we see Jesus uses the phrase I am in this passage. Here in verse 5, he uses it again in verse 6, when Jesus said to them, I am, and then down again in verse 8, Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. And John is very fond of using words that have dual meanings. He loves double meanings. It's kind of his literary style. And I believe that's what John is doing here. We know from the first verse of this book that Jesus was God incarnate. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John knew exactly who he was dealing with. And so 3 times here in this little passage, he inserts Jesus' declaration to be Yahweh in the flesh. Now, when he said, I am, the first time, the soldiers and the law enforcement officers, the police, if you want to use that term, they drew back and they fell to the ground. In fact, he almost blew them completely out of the garden. Literally what it says is that they went away to the back. His power that emanated from him was like a sonic blast of some kind, a blast of energy, invisible energy, that knocked them completely off their feet and knocked them to the back of the garden. Now realize Jesus could have released this power anytime he wanted to. He could have gone into the Sanhedrin for his trial. He could have released this force, this supernatural power. He could have blown them through the back wall of the Sanhedrin. Now what does this mean, that Jesus did not do that? It means that he laid down his life. His life was not taken from him because no man had the power and the capacity to do that. Jesus laid down his life for us to be the Savior of the world. Now, one last thing here. There's also the incident where Peter cuts off the ear of the name of the servant whose name was Malchus. I believe this is an indication, by the way, that Malchus became a Christian. And he said, look, so Peter's, he's going around doing his ministry. Malchus says, hey, I'm the guy you cut his ear off. That's me. And man, and he said to John, look, if you're going to write a story, would you please put my name in there? Because that was me that it happened to. So Malchus gets his little bit of fame here as he's inserted in John's gospel. But remember, Peter took the sword. Jesus told him, remember Luke 22:36, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one because you are going to be numbered with the transgressors. So Peter thought, okay, that gives me license to go to war. That gives me license to pull out my sword and chop off this guy's head. And of course, Peter, typical ineptitude, he missed and cut off his ear. And Jesus healed it, put it back on there and everything. But there's a very important lesson here that we, as Jesus says, look, no more. Put your sword away. We're not handling this way. And the point here is when we are approached by law enforcement, whether it's a traffic cop or rather it's a policeman on the beat, we are to cooperate with law enforcement even if we know that the arrest is an unjust arrest. We are not, as God's people, as Christ followers, we are not to resist arrest. And that's the example that Jesus sets for us here. These officers had legal authority to place him under arrest. He cooperated with them because they had legal authority. Even though the arrest was unjust, the authority they used was just, and he cooperated with that. Well, let's go to prayer. Lord Jesus, we know that you chose to go to the cross, to drink the cup that the Father gave you to drink for us, for me, for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point. And we thank you for giving up your life for us. And we declare that you are altogether worthy to be known as our Lord and as our Savior. Lord, we confess that we are weak as Peter was. We know our own weakness and how easy it is for us to be silent or to hesitate to identify ourselves with you. We ask you, Holy Spirit, to enable us to be strong when we feel weak so that we may openly and freely confess you.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. During an interview with NBC's Craig Melvin, former President Bill Clinton became demonstrably flustered when asked to address his extramarital relationship with Monica Lewinsky under the lens of the Me Too movement. When asked whether he owed Lewinsky a personal apology, Clinton responded by saying he left the White House in debt. That was an amazing moment. When questioned about moral responsibility, Bill Clinton chose to talk about money. I guess it really is all about the money after all, for the Clintons.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. You know, one of the things you quickly learn about the viewpoint of the left is that it is irrational and it is completely lacking in common sense. There is simply no common sense in the worldview that comes from the left, and they don't see it. You know, they think they're the brightest bulbs on the tree, and so you can't convince them, you can't reason with them. There's no logic there, there's no rationality there. But here's another instance of just the illogic of the left, how they simply have no ability. I mean, they have somewhere along the line, they have forfeited their ability to think rationally and logically about contemporary issues. Their solutions to problems just do not make sense at any level. Now, let me give you an example. This is from California, which should come as no surprise. But voters in California in 2014 passed something called Proposition 47. Now, what Proposition 47 did, and this was designed to, you know, their mentality, we're just throwing too many people behind bars. Too many people are going to prison. Too many people are going to jail. We are robbing these poor young men of their future. We have to go easier on them. We have to be warmer and kinder and gentler and more compassionate with these criminals so that they will see the error of our ways. They'll see our love. They'll respond to our compassion, and they will straighten out and become good law-abiding citizens. Now, what Proposition 47 did is it lowered criminal sentences for drug possession, for theft, for shoplifting, for identity theft, and for receiving stolen property, writing bad checks, and check forgery. Now, these all, prior to Proposition 47, were felonies. Proposition 47 lowered them all to misdemeanors. Now, felony is going to get you jail time every time. A misdemeanor can get you a fine. It can get you a very light sentence. So California patted themselves on the back, how enlightened, how compassionate, how sensitive they were to the criminal element, and how this was going to revolutionize cultural life in California. Well, it has. Californian voters, this is a piece from the Sacramento Bee, California voters' decision to reduce penalties for drug and property crimes in 2014 contributed to a jump in car burglaries, shoplifting, and other theft. Larcenies increased about 9% by 2016. Motor vehicles theft accounted for 3/4 of the increase, and so forth. Violent crime spiked by about 13%. Now let me ask you, you are a clear-thinking individual. This is not rocket surgery here. This just requires a minimal understanding of human nature. So you and I are reading this. If you lower the penalty for crime, what are you going to get? You are going to get more crime. It's going to happen every time. I mean, it was so easy to foresee the consequences here, but liberals apparently have become so clouded, their judgment is so clouded, they just cannot even see what's right in front of their faces. By the way, we've made this point before, but it's worth making again. We do not have in Washington, D.C., a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and it's a genuine spending problem. The federal government collected a record amount of income taxes through the first 8 months of this fiscal year. That's from October 1 through the end of May. They collected in income taxes, individual income taxes, that's the money that comes out of your wallet and mine, $1,143 billion. But the problem is they spent so much money that they went another $532 billion with a B dollars in debt. So they collected a record amount in taxes, but they spent a record amount in money, and so went another $500 billion in the hole. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just do not have a revenue problem in Washington, D.C. What we have is a spending problem. That always has been the problem. You know, we've talked about that with Medicare going to go bankrupt in 2026, Social Security going dead bankrupt in 2034. You know, one of the things that's going on in Germany, I'm picking a few stories off the top here, but one of the things that's going on in Germany is there's a movement right now to pull the plug on political talk shows like Focal Point. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is coming to America. I mean, Europe is about 5-10 years ahead of where we're going to be unless we put the brakes on. But they're calling now for the plug to be pulled on the nation's multitude of political talk shows. You know why? Because the populist agenda, this is a quote from The Guardian, a London newspaper, the populist agenda, that means the agenda that people want, that the populists want, that the populace likes, the stuff that we talk about on Focal Point. It's common sense, it's logic, it's rational, it's backed up by data, backed up by the scriptures, backed up by logic, backed up by the law, backed up by history. That's why it's popular, because it makes sense. But they believe that these far-right talk shows in Germany have contributed, or the talk shows have contributed to the rise of conservatism, to the rise of what they call the far right. So we've got to shut them down. They're having too much influence on the way our people think. They're turning them into conservatives instead of the good socialists that we want them to be. So anyway, be prepared for that. That energy is going to be heading this way. It's already there, you know, with what Facebook is doing to censor conservative viewpoints. I mean, they are shutting down conservative websites all over the fruited plain. Every week you'll read about another one being shut down. So that energy is on the way to the U.S. Now, I came across another story from Pew Research that 7 in 10 Americans, 68%, have news fatigue. Raise your hand if that's where you are. Almost 7 in 10 Americans feel worn out by the amount of news that there is these days. Now, that 68% feel just worn out. I mean, they're just fatigued because there's so much news to wade through every day. And I'll tell you, if you watch any of the cable news shows, I mean, you'll not only get news fatigue, you will get news angst. I mean, I can't even listen to cable shows that are on CNN or on MSNBC or any of the networks. I can't even watch that news for more than 10 minutes because I get so agitated because it's so far off the mark. It makes so little sense, so contrary to logic and the rule of law, it just makes you want to grind your teeth. So the solution is, ladies and gentlemen, here it is. I'm going to give you a solution to this news fatigue. Don't watch cable news anymore. Don't watch network news anymore. Keep your radio tuned to AFR and listen to us. What we will do is we will absorb all of your news angst, all of your news fatigue. We will take it upon our broad shoulders. We will watch the news that you can't bear to watch. We'll sift through it, and we'll give you the essence of what is going on. I got a story in here, just made me think of it. See if I can find it over in Hawaii. Do you know that the volcano in Hawaii, they have the biggest volcano, the biggest lake on Hawaii, on the main island. This is the big island, not Oahu, where my daughter lives, but Hawaii, the big island. The biggest lake on the island of Hawaii is 200 feet deep. And when the lava flow from this volcano, Kilauea, when it reached that lake, it burned that lake dry in 90 minutes. Wow. It converted all of the water in that lake, the deepest and biggest lake on the island of Hawaii, into steam, and it was gone in 90 minutes. An empty bowl there. Now, here's the story from Forbes. I haven't even read it. I'm just intrigued by the headline, so we will discover this story together. Hawaii's Kilauea volcano has been fiercely erupting for well over a month. Now, residents are finding little green gems that have fallen out of the sky during Kilauea's eruption. The green gems are olivine crystals, a common mineral found in Hawaii's lava. At jewelry quality, the mineral is called peridot. Peridot or peridot, I don't know how you say that. I've never seen that word before. But as the volcano erupts, it blasts apart molten lava, allowing for green olivine minerals or olivine minerals to be separated from the rest of the melt and fall as tiny little gemstones. So that's what's going on with the volcano in Hawaii. And that triggered something. No, maybe that was the story about the lake.
Yeah, there was also reports that there was a unforeseen danger as the lava flow was flowing into the ocean. A steam would rise up, and because it had so much there, it was creating like glass-like particles in the air that people had to be very careful about being around that.
Yeah, and they've got something there called VOG, V-O-G. My daughter told me about that.
What's that?
It's the volcanic ash that settles over a community like fog. Huh. But it's not fog, it's VOG. It's volcanic particles. Huh. But it looks just like fog. And that stuff is harmful to health because of all the toxic minerals and stuff that it contains in it. Quick update from the month of Ramadan. The Muslim workers in Amazon's warehouse are complaining that their workloads are unfair because, remember, they don't eat basically from sun up to sundown, so they claim it's not fair. Amazon has already given them a prayer room at that location, and they're building a permanent prayer room for the Muslims. And the question is, are they doing the same for the Christians that work for them? I'm willing to bet every dollar I've got that the answer to that question would be absolutely not. No way, Jose. Now, here is a winnable war moment. We've got more news on the sanctity of life, but let's start with this winnable war moment before we get to the break. There's a Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood's trying to expand in Missouri. So they were intending, I think, to build, let's see, how many facilities did they want to build? Like 5 or 8. But they couldn't build one because they couldn't find anyone who was willing to kill babies. Couldn't find anyone to staff their abortion clinic. So that's a winnable war moment. They wanted to open one. They wanted to build one. They could not find anybody who was willing to use his medical talent to kill babies. And we can praise God for that. You know, and I've told you this before, that abortion providers, they are bottom feeders in the medical community. They have no respect among the other professionals in the medical community. Why? Because what does the rest of the medical community exist to do? To save life and to heal people. What do abortionists exist for? To take human life. So they're despised by professionals in the medical community. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. This Sunday is Father's Day. This is now the 6th Father's Day since my father went home to be with the Lord at the age of 91. If you have your father still with you, be grateful and be sure to let him know how much you appreciate him sometime this weekend. If your dad is deceased, like mine, spend a few moments thinking about him and giving thanks for his influence in your life. Dads, especially ones that marry and remain married to the mothers of their children, are becoming increasingly an endangered species. And more of our children and young people are growing up without the presence or the influence of their fathers. A rapidly growing mountain of evidence informs us that father absence is dangerous and damaging to adolescents and children. And yet, we continue to devalue fathers and the essential role they play in the development of their children into healthy, productive adults. Every Father's Day, I think about the biblical story of the prodigal son. Everyone can relate to this story of the rebellious son who comes home to a father who has been scanning the horizon, longing to see his long-lost son come home. When the father sees his son, yet a far way off, he had compassion, and he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. His father welcomed him back and celebrated his return. All of us want a father like that. And the good news is that in God, the Father of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, we do have such a loving, forgiving, reconciling Father. Whatever your earthly father was like, your heavenly Father will always be there if you trust him and accept his Son's sacrificial death on the cross for the guilt of your sin. I promise you, you will never be alone again. Go home to your heavenly Father this weekend. He is waiting to welcome you with open arms. For more information about Southern Evangelical Seminary or how you can download the free SES mobile app, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hello and welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Glad to have you in the conversation. Focal Point, the program. American Family Radio is the network. Honored to welcome to our decision maker line somebody who's getting the job done in the state of Indiana, and that is the director of the American Family Association of Indiana. This is our state affiliate in the state of Indiana. His name is Micah Clark. Micah, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Well, it's great to be on, Brian. That's very kind of you. I couldn't do anything I do without the Lord, and second of all, without AFA's help nationally. So I appreciate you guys a lot.
Well, thank you, Micah. And I know I've done what you're doing for some time, and I know it can be kind of a lonely deal to fight the pro-family battle in a state when you seem like you're about the only voice that's out there that's seeking to defend these values. And so I commend you for doing it. Very proud of you, and we really appreciate here all of. We were talking about it just the other day, just a good job that you are getting done in Indiana. Well, let's talk about the state convention in Indiana. You were an integral part of what happened there. So tell us, just recap for us, going in, looking back to the run-up to the convention, what was the issue that was on the table that you were concerned about? And there were some other pro-family people that joined you in this. What was the issue you were concerned about?
Well, every 2 years in Indiana, and I assume it's that way in other states as well, the Republicans and the Democrats have state conventions, just like we see every 4 years nationally on TV. I was in Southern Indiana this year in a town called Evansville, and the Republican Party met for the state convention. There were, I think, about 1,400 delegates that gather for that convention. It's much like the national convention, only smaller. The platform, much like the national Republican platform. Well, the state party platform had two sentences in it that talked about strong families. The first sentence mentioned marriage as the union of man and woman being the basis for strong families, and the second sentence was more of a sentence recognizing other family formations, single parents, grandparents, that type of thing. But it noted the importance of marriage in public policy, which the national platform actually discusses how important marriage is in 2 full pages. We only had 2 sentences. But the liberals didn't like the word marriage. It's very ironic, Brian. You know, homosexual activists fight for same-sex marriage, and they win, and then they don't like the word marriage. So they didn't want the word marriage in our platform. And that upset conservatives, and we sounded the alarm with your help at AFA as well, and fired things up, stirred things up, made the party kind of mad because they were wanting to release the platform only 2 days before the convention when nobody could do anything about it. And we got the news out well over a week in advance. And when all was said and done, the delegates voted by about 80% to reject the new proposal and stick with the original language affirming marriage, which had been there in 2016 and 2014 as well.
So that's a huge win for the pro-family movement there. I mean, it's one state, it's Indiana, but this is the official platform now of the Republican Party. And, you know, I wonder, Micah, I don't want you to be critical of anybody you don't want to be critical of, but now look at the strategy that the people on the other side of this issue pursued in Indiana. They basically tried to spring this on the members of the party and the attendees at the convention. They're going to show up. They're going to get a platform in their hands. They're going to be all this other kind of stuff going on, meetings and subcommittees and committees and this and that and plenary speakers, et cetera. And so they're kind of hoping that the actual content of the platform is going to kind of get lost in all of the chaff and all of the stuff that's in the air, and they can kind of slide this through without anybody knowing about it, and everybody will vote for it because they think it's fine. They trust the party leadership, and boom, they get home and find out that they just weakened the plank on marriage. So I guess, you know, Thomas Jefferson said vigilance is the price of eternal liberty, and I guess you're demonstrating that in Indiana. If it wasn't for the vigilance of people like yourself, this thing could have slid through.
Well, you're exactly right, because the platform plank was still titled Strong Families, and it looked very similar. You had to kind of take last year's language or 2 years' language ago and compare it to this year and realize, hey, they intentionally cut out the word marriage. Now, what's funny, Brian, and you've seen this in talking about tolerance, they did this under the name of inclusion or diversity. But what's funny is, how do you include, how are you more inclusive when you cut out 52% of the homes in Indiana that are headed by married couples? That's not inclusion, that's exclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, we're seeing that over and over again in these court cases, Mike. I mean, even, you know, the one that just came out this last week or this week about the two women in Arizona that make wedding invitations, and they were found in violation of the law about inclusion. So if that's upheld, they'll have to shut their business down. And so on the grounds of inclusivity, these women are being excluded entirely from the marketplace in Arizona. So there's a misnomer with the term inclusivity. And Micah, you also point out in a little newsletter I got from you about this, the importance of ordinary people responding to your appeal and to the appeal of others to make their will known about this issue, and how important that was.
Well, it's very important. The Platform Committee had hearings in April where they said that they wanted information and wanted to get people's opinions. There were newspaper articles about the platform, asking people to contact the state party, let them know what they thought. And we found out later that there were 750 people who contacted the party in April about keeping the pro-life plank and keeping the pro-family plank, and 650 of those 750 people said leave the family plank as is, protect marriage. They ignored that. They tried to sneak it through. And when we found out, we alerted them again a couple weeks ago, and they got flooded again with phone calls and email. But that time it got the attention of the delegates. It got the attention of several legislators, several congressmen, several people who were down at the convention, several candidates. And they said, no, we want to run on family and don't move to the left, especially in a state like Indiana where the vice president is from, and the president and vice president won in Indiana by 20 points in a landslide. Why would you move to the left when the Republicans in Indiana hold every office statewide? They hold supermajorities in the legislature, and the vice president is from here. It made absolutely no sense to move to the left when clearly people in Indiana are still values voters.
Well, I guess that's kind of my point there. You know, you see people that rise to electoral office, Micah, this happens all the time, and there's some kind of gravitational pull to the left. I mean, they can run as staunch conservatives. They may even believe everything they say on the campaign trail, but when they get into the upper echelons of political leadership, there's just some kind of magnetic or gravitational pull that's pretty tough to resist, and it pulls them away from conservatism. and toward the center and even toward the left. And I wonder, Mike, if maybe these people know that. I think they know it. That's why they try to sneak this stuff through. You said this is the third time now that moderates have tried to weaken the pro-family platform there, and they know it, and so they try to ignore their constituents. They hope their constituents won't find out that 650 out of 750 that their voices have been ignored. But when the people speak up, when they make their voice heard, make their voice known, eventually these people have to wake up and realize, look, these are the people that we're counting on to elect us, to put us in office, to make contributions to our campaigns, to walk the neighborhoods and make phone calls. We'd better get our minds right and listen to the people that we're actually supposed to represent.
Well, if there's something about Indiana, it's probably like in every state. When legislators get elected from southern Indiana or northern Indiana, they get sent to the center of the state in Indianapolis. It's almost as if they forget the people who elected them, and they read nothing but the Indianapolis Star, which is very liberal. I noticed that when I went to Washington, D.C. years ago for the first time. It seemed like every television I saw out there in the airports and hotels and everywhere is playing CNN. And you come back to Indiana and everybody's watching Fox News. It's a huge disconnect, and a lot of it is that they tend to think everybody thinks like liberals, and it's not true. One of the things that has been so effective for us is how American Family Association, American Family Radio, and other things have been able to go around the liberal media, reach our people who hold our values, and activate them, because the liberal media isn't going to tell the story. They tried to make this into an issue over homosexuality, and we kept saying over and over again, it's not about homosexuality. It's about what marriage does. For example, children who grow up in a two-parent married home are more likely to graduate from high school. Kids who have a married mom and dad are less likely to use drugs. Kids who have a married mother and father in the home are less likely to be arrested for a crime. I mean, all the things the government deals with, all the social problems we deal with, marriage has a direct impact on, but the media would not report that. They wanted to turn it into an LGBT issue so they could defend the liberal position and make us the bad guy when we were talking about positive things about family and marriage.
Yeah. And really, the reality is it's not about homosexuality. Bottom line is it's about children.
Right.
What's the optimum nurturing environment for children? We all ought to care about that, regardless of the nature of our politics. We all should want what is best for children, what gives them the best start in life. And all the evidence, as you pointed out, Michael, all the evidence indicates, social research and all that, the optimal nurturing environment for children is in a home where they're being raised by a mom and a dad who are married to each other.
Yes. It's amazing how God plans always works best in public policy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting, Mike, I'll let you go with this, but I read an article today, in fact, we just talked about it in the last segment, that in Germany they're trying to outlaw talk shows for a year. They're trying to outlaw political talk shows for an entire year because they are turning the German people into conservatives, and they just can't stand it. So again, they can't out debate us, they can't out argue us, they can't out reason us. So what they've got to try to do is simply shut us down, and we are not going to go away. My guest,
liberalism goes against the laws of nature. If people look around, they don't see that liberalism works very well.
Yeah, every place you look, it doesn't. My guest has been Micah Clark. He's the director of our Indiana affiliate, AFA-Indiana, doing a fabulous job there defending our values in the Hoosier State. So thanks, Micah, for taking time to chat with us. Congratulations on this victory. That's a big win for the pro-life movement, and we pray that God will continue to bless your work.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, you bet, Micah. We'll talk to you again. Okay, Micah Clark, AFA-Indiana, getting it done. And I forgot to ask him this question. It was an important question, and I left it out. But there are a number of influential political leaders in Indiana that are standing with Micah Clark and the pro-family movement. The Attorney General, Curtis Hill, standing with the family. House Speaker Brian Bosma, standing with the family. Congressman Jim Banks, standing up for natural marriage. And also, the Republican at the top of the ticket this fall for Senate is U.S. Senate candidate Mike Braun. So some good, solid leadership in Indiana. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
What Solomon is saying here is, remember, God is in heaven and he sees everything. You are on earth and your vision is very limited. If you could see what God sees, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying. That's what Solomon is teaching us.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Searching for Heaven on Earth, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
The American Family Association invites you to a very special gathering of AFA friends from across America this fall at the Big Cedar Lodge in the Ozarks. The AFA retreat will be a relaxing time of fellowship and inspiration. Speakers include Sandy Rios, Dr. Ray Pritchard, Todd Starnes, Abraham Hamilton III, and Ed Vitagliano, and Dennis Jernigan will lead us in worship. Experience all of this in a beautiful setting that dates back to the 1920s, built originally to be a wilderness retreat for a prominent Missouri family. We hope you'll join us October 8th through the 11th at the rustic Big Cedar Lodge just south of Branson on Table Rock Lake. It promises to be a refreshing time of worship, teaching, fellowship, and fun. To register or for more information, visit afafoundation.net. Seating is limited, so register today. Hope to see you there.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the Network American Family Radio, and with me is my sidekicks, Jeff and Rob. And Jeff, you were showing me a story. Do you still have that up?
About Ireland?
Yeah. Because this just shows you what happens when the left starts to make some inroads. They don't stop. They don't quit. They continue to press you. Give them an inch, and they will take a mile. And remember, Ireland, for all of its history, has been pro-life. All of its history, it's been pro-life. And then, I don't know, a month or so ago, they had a referendum. It's the 8th Amendment to their Constitution, says we're pro-life. And they overturned that thing to grant the women in Ireland what they would call freedom of choice. So liberals are telling us this is all about choice. This is all about preserving reproductive choice. This is all about allowing women to make the choice that they want to make. But we find out very quickly that the left is not about choice at all. They're not about choice in any way, shape, or form. So what's going on now in Ireland?
Well, apparently the Irish Prime Minister has said that Irish Catholic hospitals will now have to perform abortions. They don't get any choice in that.
You know, and probably the deal is they can't find abortion providers there. So they're going to have to compel them. I mean, it's been a pro-life state, pro-life country, so there's no abortion industry other than kind of the back alley stuff. I mean, they go to the continent. You know, they'll go to the European continent or down to London to get abortion.
But I don't think it'll take long for the money motivation on getting established in Ireland. I think Planned Parenthood type places would move in pretty quickly.
Yeah, and they'll probably open their doors. I mean, Planned Parenthood gets squeezed out in America, so they'll go to Ireland.
This is Irish Catholic hospitals are now, you know, they were built and constructed in order to help people. And they did that through their religious convictions and compassion for people that needed healing. Now they're being forced to perform abortions. I think that's just really tragic.
And it's against their will, and so it just gives the lie to everything that they say they are about being for women and for choice and all that. They are not at all. They're about compulsion. They're about tyranny. They can't help but turn authoritarian just as soon as they can. So that's the latest from Ireland. All right, let's get some sound bites out of the inventory and into circulation. You know, this is an interesting thing to me. Let's start with clip R1, Rob. This is an interesting thing to me because the left and Democrats just demonize Donald Trump every time they turn around. They want to bash him. They want to demonize him. They want to vilify him. We've got a clown for a president. He's an idiot. He's a moron. He's a lunatic. He's going to lead the world into World War III. The guy's a bozo. Kim Jong Un ran circles around him at the summit, all that kind of stuff. Yet here's Heidi Heitkamp. Listen to this. Heidi Heitkamp, she's running for re-election as a Democrat in the state of North Dakota. Listen to the ad that she's now running in North Dakota.
I'm Heidi Heitkamp. And when I ran for the Senate 6 years ago, I said I wouldn't vote the party line because I don't think either party has all the right answers. That's why I voted over half the time with President Trump, and that made a lot of people in Washington mad. But when I agree with him, I vote with him. And if his policies hurt North Dakota, he knows I'll speak up. I approve this message because I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for anybody. I only answer to you.
So that's interesting because she's admitting, you know, and she would not do this unless she knew that the people that she wants to vote for her like Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump. They admire Donald Trump. They support what Donald Trump is doing, and she wants to get a piece of that energy. She knows if she runs against Donald Trump, that's a suicide mission. You can't run against Donald Trump now. If you're from any one of these states that leans red, you cannot run against Donald Trump and expect to win. So that's kind of that's really kind of an astounding commercial when you've got a Democrat who makes the heart of their commercial, why you ought to elect me, is that I vote with the other side. I vote with the other team more than half of the time. So that's Heidi Heitkamp. Now, speaking of Donald Trump, you're going to love this. I have an excerpt from the video. This is clip 2, Rob. It's fairly long. It's a couple of minutes worth because I wanted to be sure you got the flavor of it. But these are excerpts from the video that Donald Trump prepared to show to Kim Jong Un, and he did. He went to North Korea with this video in his attaché case, pulled it out, and they showed this video to Kim Jong Un. And it's in the form of a trailer for a movie. And I believe, I don't know this for a fact, I mean, who can know, Hidden Kingdom and all that, but I'm willing to bet that Kim Jong Un is a big fan of Western movies. A big, big fan. You know, they don't get them over there. None of the people ever get to see a Hollywood movie in North Korea. But I bet secretly he loves them. He gets his hands on every one that he possibly can. Probably sends out to China for DVDs of American movies. So as long as you're there picking up, what did he have? Oh, McDonald's. As long as you're there picking up a Big Mac, bring me back a DVD. So anyway, so Trump, this is kind of a master stroke of diplomacy. So Trump has this video prepared for Kim Jong Un. And, of course, there's pictures to go with all of this, so you'll have to imagine the pictures in your head. But here's how the soundtrack of this trailer goes.
Of those alive today, only a small number will leave a lasting impact. And only the very few will make decisions or take actions that renew their homeland and change the course of history. History may appear to repeat itself for generations. Cycles that never seem to end. History is always evolving. And there comes a time when only a few are called upon to make a difference. But the question is, what difference will the few make? The past doesn't have to be the future. Out of the darkness can come the light, and the light of hope can burn bright. Destiny Pictures presents a story of opportunity, a new story, a new beginning, one of peace, 2 men, 2 leaders, 1 destiny. A story about a special moment in time when a man is presented with one chance that may never be repeated. What will he choose? To show vision and leadership? Or not? It comes down to a choice. On this day, in this time, at this moment, the world will be watching, listening, anticipating, hoping. Will this leader choose to advance his country and be part of a new world? Be the hero of his people? Will he shake the hand of peace and enjoy prosperity like he has never seen? A great life or more isolation? Which path will be chosen? Featuring President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong Un in a meeting to remake history, to shine in the sun. One moment, one choice. What if? The future remains to be written.
So there it is. Trailer like a Hollywood movie. And I'm willing to bet that Kim Jong Un has planned this thing over and over and over, showing it to all of his friends, showing it in the palace and all that kind of stuff. I bet he just eats this thing up. And meanwhile, you know, the message all the way through this thing is be a hero, work for peace, join the modern world. Very subtle, but extremely effective. You know, the New Yorker, I read a review in the New Yorker of this little movie, and they refer to the nature of this film, its grandiosity, its gaudiness, its chaotic logic, its indiscriminate idiocy. So that's how they describe the trailer, but I'm willing to bet that it's working on Kim Jong-un's mind. Now here's Scott Adams. He's the guy that created Dilbert, the comic strip, and he wrote a book, Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter, bestseller last fall. And here's what he had to say to people watching his, I think he's doing a live stream on Facebook, something like that. Here's what he had to say.
You have to watch it. Let me give you my first reaction. I just watched it. It's fresh in my mind. It might be the best thing that anybody ever did in a negotiation. Period. It might be, in the history of the world, the best thing anybody ever did. It is so good. It hits every note perfectly.
So Scott Adams said this is the high mark of negotiations in the history of the world. This is the best thing that anybody has ever done in a negotiation. Now, Donald Trump getting some praise from some interesting places. Let's go to clip 5. This is Gloria Borger. She's a talking head on CNN, and she's commenting on Donald Trump saying, look, I don't need to prep because I've been preparing all my life. Here's what she said.
But I just think it shows you that Donald Trump really hasn't changed in 20 years. What he believed then, he believes now, and he's not gonna change his mind. So when he says he's been preparing for this his entire life, I mean, it may be partially true, even though he didn't expect to be president of the United States at that particular point, which may be why he says he didn't need to prep.
So Gloria Borger saying, look, he might be right. He's been prepping for this thing, preparing for this thing his whole life, and there's kind of a grudging admiration on her part. And what she's referring to hasn't changed his mind in 20 years is the soundbite that Jeff Reed dug up for us earlier this week from 1999, where Donald Trump was saying the same things about North Korea that he's saying today. That's what she's talking about, hasn't changed in 20 years. By the way, we're going to take phone calls at the end of this second hour. Get into the phones a little bit early in the second hour, so stay with us. We'll take your phones at the end of the second hour. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher with you. Focal Point, the program. We'll be right back after the news.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The God Who Speaks explores the evidence of the Bible's inspiration and authority through some of the world's most respected biblical scholars.
The Bible subjects itself to historical verification. It puts itself at risk of inquiry.
From the American Family Association, The God Who Speaks, available now at thegodwhospeaks.org.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Trump is back in the White House following the summit in Singapore with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, and there is mixed opinion on the success of the meeting. Kevin Cork reports.
White House officials acknowledge the sort of cynicism out there that suggests the president really gave Kim Jong Un a great deal, but that photo op that will certainly play well in Pyongyang. But they also remind us that this is a president that took the very first steps towards lasting peace, and they say that is something we can all be very proud of. The president arrived not long ago after that whirlwind trip that some have argued was long on handshakes but short on granular detail. The president did take to Twitter to lay it out in simple terms for us. He said, everybody can now feel much safer than the day I took office. There is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. Meeting with Kim Jong Un was an interesting and very positive experience. North Korea has great potential for the future.
Meanwhile, a human rights activist says President Donald Trump and his team will not be fooled by any deception from North Korea related to future nuclear disarmament of the Korean Peninsula. Chad Groening has more.
President Trump made history Tuesday in Singapore, meeting face-to-face with Kim Jong Un, who rules with an iron fist over a country that arguably has the most horrific human rights record on the planet. The two leaders signed a statement of understanding that, among other things, North Korea, quote, commits to work toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Suzanne Schulte is chairman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition. She thinks Kim cannot be trusted.
I just feel that the regime is using the same playbook as Kim Jong Un's father. They're just going to try to manipulate our good intentions. Now, on our side, I do believe when you have a team like John Bolton and Pompeo, we have two people that know this regime. We have a president that has a team that will not be fooled, and he's also shown how much he cares about the people of North Korea.
And Schulte says there's only one acceptable outcome.
My hope is that we're going to see the end of this regime, because that's the only way you're going to have peace on the Korean Peninsula, is when the Kim regime is gone.
I'm Chad Groening.
There are more evacuations across Colorado where wildfires are raging.
The 416 wildfire in southwestern Colorado near Durango is burned for almost 2 weeks, growing to almost 24,000 acres. Fueled by dry conditions and winds, firefighters also dealing with dangerous terrain.
A lot of potential to get folks hurt in there, so we're trying to minimize the exposure to firefighters.
The 416 fire only 15% contained. Meantime, some 2,500 homes also evacuated near the town of Silverthorne in north central Colorado, where one of several other wildfires is growing and where fire officials expect 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts there today. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
One house of Congress apparently needs a huge nudge from the public to protect victims of trafficking.
The Trafficking Victims Protection Act expired in 2017, a law that was victim-focused. It provided funds to deal with the problem internationally and in this country. That, according to Nita Bells of In Our Backyard.
It reauthorizes $520 million in federal funding over 4 years to prevent human trafficking, protect victims, prosecute traffickers around the world. It would also prevent U.S. taxpayer funds from landing in the hands of international traffickers.
It would give the State Department an extra tool for dealing with countries that are working on trafficking but not doing enough. Bell says it's important to understand many of the victims are children, including in this country.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children determined that of the cases of runaway youth in 2016 alone, 1 of 6 of those kids are likely victims of sex trafficking, children suffering repeated rape and other forms of severe violence.
The problem is that the House has passed a bill reauthorizing funding, but the Senate has not acted, and non-government organizations are hampered in providing assistance to the victims. In Our Backyard is calling on Americans to contact the 2 senators to light a fire to move on the legislation. The measure is one of several hundred held up in the Senate. I'm Charlie Butt.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Caring about the direction our nation is headed is one thing. Doing something about it is another. The Values Voter Summit in Washington, D.C. is the premier gathering for equipping Christian conservatives for returning the culture to one that values human life, encourages families, and defends religious liberty. Plan now to join other values voters on September 21st through the 23rd. Learn more and register at valuesvotersummit.org. Valuesvotersummit.org. Sponsored in part by AFA Action.
Destiny Pictures presents a story of opportunity, a new story, a new beginning, one of peace, two men, two leaders, one destiny.
It might be the best thing that anybody ever did in a negotiation. It is so good.
What the Obama administration and our European allies did with the Iranians is a template for what not to do.
Do you think that's a Christian approach? I'm still not hearing you argue that it's a Christian policy, sir.
Jim Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, you saw Dennis Rodman as relevant.
I do. President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong Un in a meeting to remake history, to shine in the sun. One moment, one choice. What if? The future remains to be written.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Glad to have you aboard, whether you're live streaming us on Facebook, live streaming us on YouTube, which you can do. Go to YouTube, find our channel, and subscribe. And you can also hit that little bell button upper right-hand corner to get a notification every time a new live program is prepared to begin. You can listen to us on your computer at afr.net. Listen to us on one of our 184 stations that comprise the American Family Radio Network. You can listen to us on podcasts. Go to afr.net. Easy to find the podcast page there by scrolling down. You can also click the Learn More button on the Facebook page and get right to the podcast option. A couple of quick things to start the second hour. Remember, we're going to take phone calls at the end of this hour. I don't want to leave you under any misimpression about Heidi Heitkamp. She voted more than half the time with Donald Trump. She's campaigning on that because she knows that more people in North Dakota like Donald Trump than like her. So she's trying to hitch her wagon to his star. But she is by no means a conservative. She high-fived Senator Chuck Schumer after both of them voted against a bill that would have banned abortions after 20 weeks of conception. She voted against that bill, got a big high five from Chuck Schumer. She also voted against the tax reform bill that's going to give a tax break to 80% of America. Here's another Democrat up to some mischief. Her name is Claire McCaskill. Now, she made a big deal out of taking a bus ride across the state of Missouri. Very excited, she said, to hit the road in a Veterans for Claire tour. They kept a live blog of the 3-day RV trip, May 29 to May 31. However, while a lot of her folks rode in the bus, she hopped from place to place on her $1 million private plane and didn't tell anybody. Websites such as ADSB Exchange, however, used a different type of data transmission to make tracking information available to the public. Community members of the crowdsourced website upload the ADSB information broadcast by the plane and upload it straight into the site's free database, which in turn can be used to track planes such as McCaskill's. The data transmitted for the days of her RV tour indicates that it was used to travel between campaign stops. For example, May 29, first day, McCaskill's tour took her from Waynesville in central Missouri, west to Springfield, and then further west to nearby Joplin. This is according to the campaign's blog. The plane, according to the tracking data for the day, took the same route as the campaign RV. It left St. Louis, where it was based, and headed towards Springfield just after 3 p.m. And arrived 30 minutes later, right around the time when McCaskill was done meeting with local student journalists on the RV. So she apparently then hops on the plane, travels west to Joplin, And then 7 minutes after McCaskill posted she was done with her event in Joplin, the plane took off again toward Kansas City, the site of her next event, or the first event the next day. So anyway, Claire McCaskill, trying to pull the wool over the eyes of her voters, did not get away with it. All right, well, let's see if we can get through a couple of more sound bites here. We still got a couple of North Korean sound bites. Let's do the first one, I think. Clip number 1, I believe, Rob, is this is James Clapper. You know, Dennis Rodman was kind of a featured figure at the summit meeting with his MAGA cap. He wore a Make America Great Again cap, and he by his own testimony, he gave a copy of Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, to Kim Jong Un, and Kim Jong Un, according to Dennis Rodman, really liked it. Now, apparently Kim Jong Un is a basketball fan, was aware of Dennis Rodman, who is in the NBA Hall of Fame, by the way. So anyway, we find this out from James Clapper. This is the last thing I would have ever expected James Clapper to say. He was the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence for Barack Obama, and we've caught him in numerous lies over the last year about the whole Mueller investigation. So he's a part of the upper crust of the establishment. You can't get any more establishment than James Clapper. He's at the top of the pyramid, the chief intelligence officer for the entire United States under Obama. And here's what he had to say about Dennis Rodman, and it blows Chris Cuomo from CNN away.
Yes, it is, and I've long been an advocate of involving Dennis Rodman
So Jim Clapper, the former head of the former DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, you saw Dennis Rodman as relevant.
I do. He is a unique person since he has a relationship with both Kim Jong Un and with Donald Trump. And obviously has great rapport with Kim Jong Un, who is a basketball fanatic himself. So I think that there's a potential here to engage Dennis Rodman in a serious way in promoting this relationship.
So there's James Clapper. Whatever else he's doing here, he is not hosing off this summit. I mean, most people on the left are out there referring to Dennis Rodman as a clown and all that. Here's James Clapper saying, no, I think he could be an asset in this situation. You got a good relationship with both of them.
I do have one question for Como, because I saw an interview the day before with Como interviewing Dennis Rodman. So, I mean, he's legitimizing Dennis Rodman. Then he turns around and accuses Clapper of legitimizing him.
Yeah,
it's
and is astonished.
And he had a pretty astonished look
nice.
on his face.
Yeah. Now here's another kind of a surprise. Joe Lieberman. This guy's a Democrat. Remember, he was a vice presidential candidate with John Kerry in 2004. And he talks about the North Korea summit. Here's his assessment.
First, I think the summit in Singapore was a success. Now, some people will say, I've been interested overnight. President Trump is getting criticized from left and right, which makes me feel good, actually. But the point is, how much can you expect from the first meeting between two nations that have been totally separated, two leaders who are hurling verbal lightning bolts at each other just about 6 months ago? Yeah. So I think overall, the wording in the communique, denuclearization, which Kim agreed to say in response in return for security from the U.S. and prosperity for the people of North Korea, all good. What is the relevance to the Iranian negotiations? President Trump has been a real critic of that agreement. I agree with him. In some ways, what the Obama administration and our European allies did with the Iranians is a template for what not to do here.
A template. What Obama did with Iran is a template for what not to do. So that's Joe Lieberman, former vice presidential candidate on the John Kerry ticket, running basically as a Democrat. I think he fancied himself an independent, but he always caucused with the Democrats. And the Democrats, by the way, trying to edge Bernie Sanders out from 2020 by saying you got to be a signed member of the Democratic Party, got to be a card-carrying Democrat to run under our ticket for president. So they're trying to squeeze Bernie out. Focal Point American Family Radio. Be right back.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
A Montana physician is going free. Dr. Kara Harrop is opening up a direct primary care clinic. She was burned out and planning to make a career change when she discovered the DPC model. DPC clinics don't take insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid. They take cash, check, or credit cards. She thinks insurance and its administrative tasks is the central flaw in today's healthcare system, taking valuable time away from patients. So she's going independent. Her clinic will be called Pure Health DPC. She'll offer services, take monthly cash payments, build strong relationships, and be available to her patients. And we'll be asking her to sign up at jointhewedge.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly e-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
The American Family Association invites you to a very special gathering of AFA friends from across America this fall at the Big Cedar Lodge in the Ozarks. The AFA retreat will be a relaxing time of fellowship and inspiration. Speakers include Sandy Rios, Dr. Ray Pritchard, Todd Starnes, Abraham Hamilton III, and Ed Vitagliano, and Dennis Jernigan will lead us in worship. Experience all of this in a beautiful setting that dates back to the 1920s, built originally to be a wilderness retreat for a prominent Missouri family. We hope you'll join us October 8th through the 11th at the rustic Big Cedar Lodge just south of Branson on Table Rock Lake. It promises to be a refreshing time of worship, teaching, fellowship, and fun. To register or for more information, visit afafoundation.net. Seating is limited, so register today. Hope to see you there.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you in the conversation. Don't forget, we will open the phone lines up toward the end of this second hour. Speaking of the repression of speech and all that, we're seeing Germany's making a move to ban talk shows because most of them are conservative, as they are in America. And they're concerned because these talk shows in Germany are turning people into conservatives, and they cannot stand it. So they're looking to shut down conservative talk radio. Well, just all conservative talk shows, because most of the ones they'll shut down will be conservatives. Now, this is clip 8, Rob. This is the mentor of Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook guy, the guy that invented Facebook. His name is Roger McNamee. He's a technology investor, and he was a former mentor to Zuckerberg. And, we talked about the news fatigue. Remember, we talked about that earlier. 70% of people are just fed up to hear with news. Just a glut of it. They're just overloaded with it. That's why we're offering ourselves to you. We will take the bullets for you. We will read all of that aggravating news so you don't have to. We'll distill it down. We'll boil it down. We'll give you the kernel of what you need to know about what's going on in the news. But anyway, here is Roger McNamee, and listen to what he says about whether you and I can be trusted to assess the news for ourselves.
Problem with that trust is that the sources of material that the friends are sending, the quality of that has collapsed, right, as disinformation has replaced information in the economy. And we now know, thanks to MIT, that it spreads 60% faster, or 70% faster, and it goes 70% further, and it goes 6 times as fast if it's disinformation over real information. So the problem with this whole thing is not that people are stupid. It is that they have been taught to prefer sensation over substance. They've been taught to favor trending over durable. And my simple observation on this is that leaving it to the audience to make those picks is how we got here.
Okay, so he says, how did we get in this mess? Well, we let the audience evaluate the news for themselves. And he says what Facebook is trying to do is to change their algorithms and their platforming, so mostly what you get in your news feed is stuff that your friends like. But he says this just makes the problem worse because your friends are likely to have a skewed view of everything because people have been taught to prefer sensation over substance. Well, who taught them that? Facebook taught them that. CNN taught them that. NBC taught them that. MSNBC taught them that. They've been taught to favor trending over durable. Who taught them that? Social media taught them that. So we can't leave it to the audience anymore, he says, to make these decisions for themselves. We have to be the arbiters of all that and tell people what the truth is. They cannot be counted on to be able to sort that out for themselves. Now, Jeff was showing me something about Target. We're into June. You know what month June is, Gay Pride Month, and we have targeted Target as for a boycott. And Target obviously has not been chastened by the fact that 1.5 million Americans are no longer shopping at their stores. They are unchastened, they are unbridled, they are untaught, and they're making things worse for themselves instead of better. Jeff, what are they up to?
Yeah, I started getting pictures sent to me from Facebook friends of sections in the adolescent and teen sections of Target that are definitely set up for gay pride materials. They have hats, they have shirts, they have shorts and bathing suits and all kinds of stuff, and they're so I started looking it up, and sure enough, they're selling everything they sell off of that. They're giving 50% to the group called GLSEN, the gay, lesbian, straight education kind of
educational network. I mean, right. GLSEN just works in schools, junior highs and high schools. That's their focus.
Yeah, I
mean, to indoctrinate junior high students, middle school students, and high school students.
Exactly. And also on top of that, they've removed boys and girls signs from their clothing sections to be more accommodating to gender neutral type stuff. They've also removed all gender references in toys, bedding departments, and just trying to go the whole route.
Wow. This morning I was carrying around a bag full of women's clothes around AFA because
why are you bringing that up now?
Well, you'll see where I'm going with this.
Okay.
So, because Jeff's wife Ann works with girls that have come out of abortion and so forth, and they're trying to minister to these girls in every way they possibly can. And one of them is giving them a little consignment place where they can find clothes that are donated, so they can dress for work and for interviews and things like that. So Debbie went through her closet, tried to see what she could donate to the cause. And so she sent me to work today with just a bag full of these women's clothes. And I'm carrying around AFA, and I said, man, I got to get rid of these things before some people start asking me awkward questions.
One of those thin plastic bags, so you can see through
what's in there. So as quick as I could, I gave it to Jeff and said, Jeff, you walk around with this. So if anybody's going to ask awkward questions, they're going to ask them of you.
Thank goodness it was raining today because it went straight underneath my raincoat. But we probably would have been safe walking around Target.
So anyway, that's the update from Target. So every reason for our boycott to continue and no reason for it not to. I'm probably going to write a column on this, but I believe we did talk about this one day, but Phoenix has a law that requires Christian vendors to violate their own consciences. So it discriminates clearly against Christian wedding vendors. Well, it's just against Christian vendors. And so there were 2 women there that do wedding invitations. And they went to court to get that law blocked because it plainly is discriminatory against Christians. And that's a violation of federal law. Federal law says you cannot discriminate against somebody on the basis of religion, and the Supreme Court just upheld that. First Amendment rights, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. You cannot discriminate against the Christian baker who won't bake a wedding cake for a gay couple because he has fundamental First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. You cannot compel him to produce a work of art that conveys a message that violates his own conscience. And like 3 days after the Supreme Court issued that ruling, this court in Phoenix, an appeals court in Phoenix, says, oh, no, we're not listening to the Supreme Court. Forget the Supreme Court. If you're a Christian and you're a vendor in Phoenix, you got to do it. We're going to force you to violate your conscience. That's tyranny. We're going to force you to work against your will. That's slavery. We're going to force you to work for homosexual couples that come into your shop and want whatever product you're serving. And they do wedding invitations, and they're accused of saying that you're discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation, and they're not. You know what? You know the proof of that is if you were to go in there and say, look, I want to get some wedding invitations for a friend. I've got a friend that's getting married. One of my gifts to her is I want to provide the wedding invitations. And so the person is as straight as an arrow, but they're still going to get turned down, not because of the sexual orientation of the customer, but because of the message on the product. That's the problem. So again, I mean, this is a weird thing now where you've got a state court just thumbing their nose at the Supreme Court. It says, Supreme Court, you say that the First Amendment protects a Christian vendor from being discriminated against because of religion. Forget you. We believe that Christian vendors ought to be discriminated against. We're going to ignore your ruling. So much for Supreme Court precedent being the law of the land. We're going to ignore it, and we're going to force these people in Phoenix to violate their conscience. Now, they are going to appeal that, so we'll see where that thing goes. But on the gay and lesbian front, Netflix, we've already tangled with them over 13 Reasons Why. They're getting ready to launch an LGBT cartoon. Get this, it's a cartoon. Now, there are cartoons that are produced for adult audiences, and they're segregated out, but this is a cartoon for kids, and it's going to feature drag queen superheroes who save the world from evil. So then they're running a preview for a cross-dressing themed superhero cartoon. The name of this team of superheroes is Super Drags. By night, this is how the teaser reads. By night, they tighten up their corsets and transform into the baddest super drags in town, ready to combat shade and rescue the world's glitter from the evil villains. Get ready, because the super drags are going deeper than you think. Netflix says they're here, they're queer, and they're going to save the world. Super Drags, a new animated series coming soon. To make things even worse, they've got another cartoon. Well, somebody else is working on this cartoon called Drag Tots. It's about baby drag queens. Features the voice of drag icon RuPaul, and he's got it working up for his LGBT streaming service. And no word yet on an age rating or target audience for Super Drags on Netflix. They do have these things rated. Parents have ways of blocking some of the stuff. If it's correctly rated, well, if this is rated for kids, it's going to slip right through. And I think this is correct. Let you get a sneak peek of what's coming down the pike for the Supreme Court. I think probably the next major social issue that'll be before the Supreme Court is gay adoption, because there are 9 states that allow adoption agencies, private adoptions agencies, to restrict adoptions, to reserve adoptions for homes that are headed by a mother and a dad who are married to each other. And there are other states that prohibit that. I mean, Catholic Charities has shut down adoption agencies in Massachusetts. They've shut them down in Illinois because the state law won't allow them to place kids in the optimal nurturing environment. So I think that thing is going to wind up coming before the Supreme Court before too terribly long. We went to work back in 2012, some of us in the pro-family community, to protest Mitt Romney's choice of Richard Grenell to be his foreign policy advisor because he was a gay activist, out loud and active proponent of gay marriage, and we were successful. Mitt Romney finally had to let him go, finally had to fire him. Well, since then, Donald Trump appointed him just months ago to be his ambassador to Germany, and now the Germans are over there begging America. They're trying to throw this guy out of the country, not because of his gayness, but because he's done undiplomatic things over there. So we bounced him in 2012. It looks like in 2018 he might be bouncing himself. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
One of my favorite things to do in Israel is take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. Hello everyone, I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We'll be taking our annual tour of Israel in March of 2019, but it's time to sign up. We have a lot of folks sign up early, and last year, in fact, we filled up several months in advance. So for all the information on this trip to Israel, a bucket list trip for most people, go to the website twholyland.com. That's twholyland.com, or for a free brochure, call us at 800-FAMILIES, 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your phone number. We'll be flying direct from the States to Tel Aviv and then begin our tour in Jerusalem of Israel. We hope you can join us in 2019.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved, submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
I just thank God, for this moment. I mean, I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher. Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy and welcome to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Now, this is a weird thing. We've talked about these homeless camps all over the country. Seattle trying to raise $75 million by putting a super tax on Amazon and Starbucks that are headquartered in Seattle. And they put up such a fuss that the city council backed way off of that. They cut it from $500 a head to $275 a head or something like that. They collect it. Again, it's just like we talked about earlier. There's no common sense in the worldview of the left. If you put $75 million, you invest $75 million in homelessness, what are you going to get more of? You are going to get more of homelessness. You're going to get more homeless people that are going to begin to think of Seattle as the mecca of homelessness. They're going to move there. $75 million they're going to throw at the homeless problem. Just going to get more of whatever you subsidize. One of the interesting things about this, we talked yesterday about the permanent adolescence on the left. I refuse to grow up is their motto. Now we're discovering that a lot of the homeless folks are millennials that are homeless by choice. They are voluntarily vagrant, voluntarily homeless. That's the lifestyle that they like. They are called crusty punks, crusties, gutter punks, crumb bums, and dirty kids. That's some of the names they get from others in the homeless community. But they're rejecting the 9-to-5 lifestyle, and actual jobs, and they're getting into train hopping, panhandling, and being voluntarily homeless. So that's the latest thing that's going on there in the culture. One of the things they found, the people who did the research, is there seems to be a shared experience, this is an article from Fox News, a shared experience of a rough home life, sometimes abusive parents, drug abuse, and unchecked mental health issues. And some of these are from affluent backgrounds. So again, we see the importance of home life, a stable home life, mom and dad married to each other, loving each other, providing a stable environment for kids in which they can grow up. Now let's get updated very quickly on the Mueller investigation. And let's see. I've got a Yeah, I got at least one soundbite on that. Yeah, let's go to Jim Jordan. This is clip number 6, and he's the head of the Freedom Caucus. Remember, he's the guy we're hoping will become the next speaker. And they have been requesting documents from the Department of Justice that have to do with the Mueller investigation. And the DOJ under Rod Rosenstein is not cooperating. They've been stonewalling them for months, to the point now where they've had to take the Department of Justice and Rod Rosenstein to court to get the documents that by law and by the Constitution they have a right to get. Remember, the supreme branch, according to the Founders' Constitution, is the legislative branch. The Congress is designed to be the supreme branch of government. You talk about separate and equal. They're not equal. Congress is superior to the other two branches because Congress is the only branch of the government that actually has the authority to make law. All legislative power is vested in Congress. They're the only people that can make law. The executive can't, and the Supreme Court can't, according to the Founders' Constitution. You know, the executive is there to put into practice whatever laws Congress passes. They're not there to make up their own. And the Supreme Court, their job is to apply the law, not to interpret it, not to invalidate it, not to revoke it, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, Congress is supposed to be supreme. They created the executive branch. They created the judicial system and all that kind of stuff with constitutional authority. But these things are under their oversight. So if a Congress says to the Department of Justice, we need these documents, the Department of Justice needs to cough them up. And here's Jim Jordan talking about the fact that they're having to fight Rod Rosenstein, who is Jeff Sessions' appointee for these documents, is aggravating. Let's listen.
You're almost flabbergasted. I mean, what is the Attorney General saying? Rod Rosenstein hasn't complied with Devin Nunes' subpoena, hasn't complied with Chairman Goodlatte's subpoena. We've caught them hiding information in the Strzok page text messages, redacting the fact that Peter Strzok was friends with Judge Contreras, one of the FISA court judges. They tried to hide that from us. And today we learned in Catherine's report that the head of in essence, the head of the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, was threatening members of the House Intelligence Committee for doing their job, for trying to get answers for the American people. And the Attorney General says that's okay, we're doing just fine.
Well, there's, you get Jim Jordan crosswise with Jeff Sessions. I mean, a lot of people have had questions about Jeff Sessions for a long time, myself among them. I've been very patient with Jeff Sessions because I admire him. I believe he's a good, decent, and honorable man. But now Jim Jordan is saying, look, Jeff Sessions is not doing his job. We're looking for these documents, and Jeff Jordan is protecting Rod Rosenstein, who is threatening people in the House with subpoenas.
Sessions.
Rod Rosenstein is threatening people in Congress.
Okay.
Yeah, with subpoenas, and Jeff Sessions is backing him up. Jeff Sessions says, I'm okay with that, and Jim Jordan says, I am not. So more unrest about Jeff Sessions there, even among members of Congress. Let's go down to clip number 10. This is Ken Starr. This deals on the special counsel issue. Ken Starr, remember, was the special counsel under Clinton's regime. He's the one that prosecuted Clinton, wound up indicting him for perjury and so forth, cost him his law license and all that kind of stuff. Well, Ken Starr knows his way around the special counsel statute, the history of it, protocol, and all that kind of stuff. And, there's been a lot of conversation about whether Donald Trump should have this interview with Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller wants to sit him down and interview him. There have been some back-channel conversations between the two. What are the limits going to be? What are the scope of the questions and all that kind of stuff? And Rudy Giuliani and every defense attorney I've listened to that spoke out on this said there's no way in the world that Donald Trump should sit down with the prosecutor because he's going to set a perjury trap for Trump. Trump speaks with exaggeration. He speaks with hyperbole. He speaks in exaggerated terms. He may forget on Monday what he said on Friday because that's just the way he speaks. And it's dangerous for him. And Ken Starr, now, he's a special prosecutor. He knows how you get people put behind bars. And here's what he says, his advice for Donald Trump.
I think they better be cautious, and I think they are being cautious. First, we have to remember this is the President of the United States, and this is an authorized law enforcement investigation. So that makes the situation unique. Looking at it simply from the perspective of a defense lawyer, you never want your client, unless you have an extraordinarily high level of confidence, to be exposed in this way.
All right. Don't want your client exposed in this way unless you have an extraordinarily high level of confidence. I wouldn't do that with Donald Trump because of the guy's patterns of speech. And, I mean, he's just asking to be trapped. And it would be a phony trap. It would be a trumped-up trap, but they could trap him. So Ken Starr says don't do it. Well, let's start opening the phone lines. 888-589-8840 is the number. 888-589-8840. Talked about a lot this day. We talked about anything that's been in the program today. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. And we'll get them loaded up and see how many calls we can take here as we head toward the end of the program. Number again is 888-589-8840. And I think we have our problem with the phone lines fixed. Now, here's the second Ken Starr clip, and talking with Brennan. I forget which outlet this host is with. I don't even know if it's a she or a he. I don't have it in my notes here. But again, talking about whether Trump would be obstructing justice if he fired the special prosecutor.
But you believe he could?
Oh, yes. The president clearly has the authority to direct the firing, if not a direct firing himself.
What would that signify to you?
It would be, I think, but it's a political question. I don't think it's obstruction of justice, and I disagree with those who seem to find obstruction of justice in almost anything that the president has done. But it certainly would be, I think, a political firefight of the highest order, because you have people in both parties saying this is an authorized investigation, let it run its course.
All right, so Ken Starr saying, look, President Trump, without question, has the authority to fire Bob Mueller or to direct him to be fired. He would have to issue the order, the directive to Rod Rosenstein, and Rod Rosenstein would have an obligation to carry that out. And if Rod Rosenstein won't, Donald Trump can keep appointing somebody until he finds somebody who will do the deed. Now, let's play one more soundbite before we start going to the phones. Let's go to clip number 7. This is on a completely different topic, but I mentioned this to you before. The FAA, in a horrible turn of events, I mean, the FAA, these are the people that handle your plane while it's in the air. They're the ones that give you permission to take off. They're the ones that tell you which runway to land on. They're the ones that deal with any emergencies that you handle while your plane is in the air. And the FAA has chosen air traffic controllers based on merit from 1981, when Ronald Reagan fired all the ones that were there for some other reasons. Now diversity has gone to the front of the line. Clip number 7. Tucker Carlson talking to Michael Pearson, an aviation attorney.
There was a group within that organization who determined that the makeup of the workforce was too white. They wanted to get a more diverse workforce. They started lobbying through the political process, which is certainly allowed to. However, they then crafted this BQ exam, which it's not a screening test. It actually turned out that the scoring rubric for that actually penalized people with aviation experience, yes, pilots, air traffic controllers. And then to make it worse, they had folks stand in line for this test that someone in the NBCFA had apparently gotten the answers to and coached other people how to pass the test. So not only were our best and brightest, as the FAA says, actually purged off the list, they then were forced through a screening process that discriminated against them intentionally on the scoring of the test. So most, if not the great majority of them, failed that exam, while people were given the answers and how to pass the test.
All right, so Michael Pearson saying, look, people that are taking the test to be air traffic controllers are not being picked on the basis of merit or experience. In fact, the test has been constructed to penalize people who have the most experience in aviation. and other people are cheating on the test, being given the answers ahead of time so they can qualify whether they know the material or not. Be right back.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Who is God? What is He like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We'll have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the last segment of Focal Point on American Family Radio. I spoke too soon. We've got another problem with our telephone system. This is the second day out of 3 this week where we've had a technical glitch with the phone, so I don't know if we're going to be able to get that fixed in time to take any phone calls. My apologies. Again, hopefully we'll get whatever the problem is straightened out so that we don't have this problem again. Now, let's grab clip number 9. And this is an exchange between Kim Hunt and Jim Jordan. Again, same Jim Jordan, member of the House Freedom Caucus and all that kind of thing. And let me give you a couple of immigration items before we go to that soundbite. You know, with regard to birthright citizenship, which comes up every once in a while, and this is a big bugaboo for me. It has been ever since I read this section of the Constitution. Our Constitution does not require birthright citizenship for anybody who is born to parents who are not under the jurisdiction of the United States. That's specifically what the 14th Amendment says. If the parents are subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., the child that they bear is an American citizen. But if they are not subject to the jurisdiction, if they're subject to foreign jurisdiction, that is, they are a citizen of another country, just because the child is born here does not mean that that child is a citizen. So that's been misinterpreted now, virtually since that amendment was put into place. Just how quickly a plain meaning of an amendment can be misinterpreted, like the one on income tax, the 16th Amendment. What the founders of the 16th Amendment, the Congress at the time, meant by income was anything other than wages and salaries. That's the one thing that they weren't talking about. They were talking about corporate income. They were talking about interest income. That kind of stuff. It was everything but wages and salaries. And then in a few years, somebody just changes the definition of income, and all of a sudden it includes wages and salaries, and now here we are. So sometimes these plain meaning in the Constitution can get warped, I mean, almost right out of the chute. Do you know there's only 30 countries in the world that allow birthright citizenship? Only 30 in the country. Out of 190 nations, only 30, and only 2 of them are developed countries. Only 2, the United States and Canada. But in Europe, there is not a single nation in Europe that allows birthright citizenship. So all these children being born to illegals all over Europe, they're not citizens, not a single solitary one of them. But you know, you never hear the left in America refer to the Germans and the French as xenophobes because they do not allow birthright citizenship. So anyway, that's what's going on. 30 countries in the entire world and only 2 developed countries, and that's the U.S. and Canada. So anyway, Jim Jordan, talking about this fight over immigration policy, there's a move. There's a good bill that's being considered. The Goodlatte bill is a good bill. There's another one, I don't know whose name is attached to it. That's a bad bill. So these things are going to be hashed out in the coming weeks. But right now, Jeff Sessions is implementing the asylum policy as it is written. And the asylum policy as it is written, if somebody comes into the country and they're illegal and they're not eligible for asylum, then they're put in detention because they have broken the law. And that means the separation of families. We do not want to put children in an adult prison. You don't want to do that. That's why we have juvenile detention facilities. We don't want them in the general population when the bulk of the population are older criminal males. Not a good idea. So you got to separate them for the protection of the children. You know, this is what we do when you have an adult. He commits armed robbery. Where's he going? He's going to prison, going to jail. Who's he going to be separated from? He's going to be separated from his children. That family is going to be broken up, and it's his fault. He's the one that broke the law. So that's the issue with these asylum situations and these children being separated from their parents. Yeah, it's a terrible situation, but you have to ask yourself, who's to blame for this? And the reality is it's the parents that are to blame because they're the ones that broke the law and put their kids in this vulnerable situation. Don't blame that on Trump. Don't blame that on Jeff Sessions. Don't blame that on the United States of America. Anyway, here is Casey Hunt, NBC, talking with Jim Jordan about whether this asylum policy, where if you break the law you get punished, whether this is a Christian policy. And she just nags him about this. She just gets after him. She won't leave it alone. She's trying to worry him to death over the question of whether this is a Christian policy. And, of course, it is. It's the rule of law is a Christian policy. You break the law, you pay a penalty. Let's listen to their exchange.
Do you think that's a Christian approach?
What I do know is the asylum laws need to be changed. When some 19-year-old can come here and say there's a credible fear of persecution and that 19-year-old is actually a part of MS-13, we've got to change our asylum laws. Right now,
I'm not asking you about people who are part of MS-13. I'm asking you about, say, a young woman who comes here and says, I'm a victim of domestic violence.
I'm saying,
our asylum laws previously said she could come here and apply for asylum.
And what I'm saying is, in a general sense, our asylum laws have to change because anyone can show up at the border. They've been coached. They say, I have a credible fear of persecution. That persecution is X, Y, whatever. Then that needs to be changed. Certainly, we don't want anyone to be, any domestic violence victims not getting refuge and safety from that. But what I'm saying is the asylum laws have to be changed. Everyone agrees with that.
And you think that's the Christian approach to that?
What I'm saying is, no, for people who are truly persecuted, we want to help them. What I'm saying is asylum laws have to change. Let's get on with that. And what mostly needs to happen, Casey, is we need an immigration law. We need an immigration bill that is consistent with what we told the American people. Sanctuary cities needs to be changed. E-Verify, chain migration, visa lottery, building a border security wall. Let's focus on all those policies that were front and center in the campaign. And then we will also deal with the DACA population. Let's have that kind of bill that's consistent with what we told the American people we were going to do if they elected us.
I'm still not hearing you argue that it's a Christian policy, sir.
And she had a smirk on her face the entire time. In other words, she was not interested in finding out whether this is good policy or not. She was interested in poking Jim Jordan. You know, and the reality is, here's somebody that you catch her in another setting. She is all about the separation of church and state. You cannot mix religion and politics. You got to keep religion out of politics. That's terrible. Mm-hmm. That's how you get to a theocracy. What she's doing here, she's insisting on inserting religion into this conversation, despite the fact that every other place she would say, no, you got to have this clear separation between the two. But, Jim Jordan basically answered her question. She's talking about domestic violence, and Jim Jordan says, we don't want anyone to be any domestic violence victims, not getting refuge and safety from that. So Jim Jordan says, no, that's not what we want. We don't want people that are victims of domestic violence not to get refuge. and said the same thing about people who are persecuted. We want to help them. So she's answering her question that, yeah, those things are very Christian policies. Protect those that are victims of domestic violence, help those that are being persecuted, but she's not interested in hearing any of that because she has the proverbial axe to grind.
Don't you find it odd when unbelievers start telling you how Christians should believe? I mean, you're seeing more and more in this. You ran into this yesterday on the interview where an atheist was basically telling you how you, as a Christian, should believe.
Yeah, they kind of appoint themselves theologians in chief.
Yeah.
You know, they reject the Bible, and then they want to become arbiters of what the Bible actually means, and they have no intention of following the Bible themselves, but they have no hesitation telling you how you should be following the Bible for yourself. All right, again, my apologies about the phones. I don't know what the hang-up is. We've had technicians looking at it, haven't been able to solve it yet, so we hopefully will be back online
it's okay,
tomorrow.
As long as your mic works.
Yeah, I guess look on the bright side. So, I don't know if you heard about this, but Austria is doing something that we need to be doing, and that is they are cracking down on mosques and imams. They are going to shut down. This is Austria. They've finally had it with Muslim immigration. They're discovering that it is the Ebola virus of culture. It's rotting out their culture from within, subject to violence and random attacks and all that kind of stuff. So they are shutting down 7 mosques in Austria, and they are expelling up to 60 imams who get their funding from Turkey. They're foreign-funded imams, foreign-funded mosques. They are out of here. We ought to be doing exactly the same thing in the United States. 80% of the mosques in America are funded by Saudi Arabia. Same rule. No more foreign-funded mosques. Well, I just think it ought to be no more mosques at all. But we ought to at least follow Austria's lead. You know, Turkey is condemning it as a racist move. Well, Islam is not a race. It is a religion. And the president of Turkey saying this after he took control of all 6 churches in one of the southeastern cities in Turkey. So he's taken possession of all of those, but you cannot close down one of our mosques. But he's saying this pushback against what he's doing, he's saying this pushback is going to lead the world toward a war between the cross and the crescent. Ladies and gentlemen, there's absolutely no question that that's where we are headed. We are headed toward a war between the cross and the crescent. Because Islam, there's no live and let live in Islam. Their goal is total conquest at the point of a sword. They will force us into submission if they get the opportunity. You know, this is the month of Ramadan, supposed to be their most holy month. One of their Muslim leaders, a guy by the name of Maulana Bashir, he said this: Ramadan is the pious month of jihad and killing. Those who attain martyrdom while waging jihad, doors of heaven remain open. Just like what we do at Christmas, isn't it? No. Where Christians all over the world go on a killing spree, killing infidels all over the place. But that's the difference. I mean, these are Muslims in their holy month. Contrast that with what Christians do in their holy month. Big rally in England, by the way. Geert Wilders showing up to demand the release of Tommy Robinson. So that issue is getting a lot of attention. Again, Tommy Robinson still behind bars, will be for 13 months. There's grave fears, legitimate fears for his safety and for his life in that prison in the UK. All right, well, that's it for today. Here's a blessing from Romans 15. May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you a spirit of unity among yourselves as you follow Christ Jesus, so that with one heart and mouth you may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. God bless you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Announcing 3 new episodes of Ryan DeFrades' Secret Agent. These animated half-hour episodes will entertain children.
That's right!
Ryan DeFrades